So this week, I decided to talk about grace and grace freely given and inquire within. Those words just came to me. And of course, what we're using there for this particular slide, it could be the doors of an old chapel, a church, whatever. But the meaning is that grace is freely given. It doesn't matter where you are on a Sunday morning. You could be at the past parade. And if your heart and your mind are in the right place, you'll find that you're living a life of grace. Now, what is grace? It's sort of hard to describe, isn't it? I was reading a story of a little nun in an Irish convent, and it was her last hours. She'd lived a long, full life. She was way up in her 90s, and she'd been healthy all this time, and then it was the last hour of her life. And she was in great pain and suffering. And so the other sisters decided to ease her pain a little bit, and they took a glass of milk and they laced it with some good old Irish whiskey. And they gave it to her, and it eased her pain immediately. And just seconds before she was to pass on to the great beyond, the one nun said, "Sister, do you have any words for us? Any words of wisdom before you pass from this life to the next?" She said, "Actually, yes, I do. Don't ever sell that cow." So sometimes maybe people have found grace in the bottom of a bottle yeah. We find grace all sorts of different places. When we were still in East Tennessee, years before we moved, we had still been involved with the Methodist Church, and as a matter of fact, that's where, with the Methodist organization, is where I first began my ministerial studies. And but one of my best friends there was an older woman in her 90s, and her name was Grace. And she exemplified that word, grace, better than anyone I have ever known. She and I talked about so many things as we were prayer partners, and we would meet a few times a week and talk. But I know she told me at that time, she said, I don't believe like the other people at my church. They don't believe that God acts in our lives on a daily basis, but I do. She said, all I need to do is pray on my way in. We lived near Kingston there on the Tennessee River. And she said, if I'm going into Kingston, I'll pray for a parking spot. And you know what? There's one that comes open magically for me. And we went on to talk about several examples of grace, because that's what she was talking about. She lived her life that way. She never complained about anybody. She would say, "Oh, well, that guy's an old pooper is what he is." She acknowledged that some people were not aligned with the higher purpose. She acknowledged that, but she really didn't kick them in the butt, you might say, about it. She just acknowledged that they were in a different place in their lives than she was. And she came for a higher calling, a higher purpose, and her life was indeed filled with grace. Now, in the class this morning, we were talking a little bit about alignment. with what we align ourselves with, whether we're going to align ourselves with worry, anger, unforgiveness, those types of things. And, we do get to choose. And I think that's where a miracle comes in, when we choose for ourselves, I am not going to align myself with worry, resentment, hatred, unforgiveness. And someone might say to me, well, what do you mean? This old so-and-so over here, you can't forgive him. Well, you can, when you understand that they're living from a different point of view than you are. I don't know. I don't really think we'll ever know until we leave this earth why there are bullies, like the man there in Russia that feels like he needs to run across there and take more land that's not theirs. We're not going to understand that, are we? And I'm just going to choose not to worry about it every day. I've been disappointed now. I will not kid you. I've been disappointed, because that's one of the most ungraceful things I've seen lately, because we're talking about grace today. And what you do when you align yourselves with that type action, you're not going to live a grace-filled life, I can guarantee you. Guaranteed. Life is going to be difficult. You're not going to find anything easy when you align yourself with that type action. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, said, "Grace is the pure, unconditional love of God, perpetually operative and expressing toward all humankind. The grace of God is God's love in action." And I kind of think of grace that way too, and love. Love is the river of life, if we can think of it that way. And grace is what propels us onward. There's some times in life that we need to paddle, and sometimes we need to float. And if we're aligned with God, the Most High, we will know when those times are, whether it's time to paddle or it's time to float. Anne Lamott said, "I do not at all understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are, but does not leave us where it found us." And from Daniel Webster, the word grace comes from an ancient root word meaning favor or benefit, divine love and protection bestowed freely on people. So yes, indeed, like my friend Grace in Tennessee, if we can align ourselves with that higher power, and that's not the way she worded it, but I knew exactly what she was talking about. But if we can align ourselves with that, our lives are much easier. There will still be times where we need to paddle, but that will come gracefully as well. And we'll find the wind of grace pushing us ever onward What was it Tagore said? All we need to do is raise ourselves. Isn't that lovely? Can you think of that in divine terms this morning? God loves all alike and causes the rain to fall and the sun to shine alike upon them. That's what Ernest Holmes wrote. Beautiful. So right in this moment then, if you're one whose preconceived notion about grace was either indifference or an experience, or if the concept of grace brought up bad memories for you, I would ask you to let those go. There was a time when the church sold favors. Oh, what a shame. What a shame. People actually thought they could go to the church and buy God's favor, God's grace. Can you imagine? That's why sometimes I even hesitate to, like I said, those are old church doors. And sometimes I know people in the sanctuary, you might have gone to church and you're only left with bad memories. You were told you were a sinner and couldn't get over it unless you confessed all your sins right there to the minister, and then, by the way, grace us with your tithe and offering on your way out, huh? And that might pay for your sin, your unworthiness. God's grace is free. That's why we said grace is freely given. Inquire within. The only place you have to inquire is right here in your own heart. Your heart and mind that are already connected to the Most High, God. I'm always drawn back when I talk about grace to a book that was written by Cheryl Richardson. It was titled The Unmistakable Touch of Grace. She's written several books that have been on the top 10 seller list. And this particular one, she said, came to her very slowly. She was at a time in her life she didn't realize she was going to write another book. But it just kept gnawing at her, kept gnawing at her, kept gnawing at her. And she said it was a period of time in her life where she felt like she was living about a foot above the ground. Do you ever have times like that? Do you have days like that where you go out and you feel like you're walking in a magical universe and your feet are about a foot above the ground? And no, we haven't been drinking that Irish whiskey. We didn't visit that sacred cow. No, it's when we've become so inspired, we are so aligned with God, the higher power, the divine, we know that a great healing is coming forth for us. We've already aligned ourselves with that, haven't we? That healing is here, right now, and we claim it. And we know that. We know that this problem that's been nagging at us has already been solved. And if we can stop that worrying and thinking and the negativity and engrossing ourselves in politics and everything else, if we can rise above that, we can see and we can hear, and the voice of God is always speaking to us. Always. Always. Now, sometimes we get into the mundane details of life and we forget. We're worried about this, you get the electric bill in and it's $500. I'll never forget a couple of times when we lived down there in Hancock County, the people that read the meter, they still read it and wrote it down by hand. And I remember the first time we got a bill it was like $498, and it hadn't even been particularly hot that month. I said, wow, wow, where did this come from? And it was like on a Friday night, and there's not a thing you can do about it until Monday morning. But those are a lot of the things that happen to us in life. They just happen, don't they? That's life. That's living here on this planet. And so what I did, I said, okay, that's enough thinking about that. I'm putting that behind me. I'll call Monday morning, and if we need to go out and live in a tent, we will, but, rather than pay that each month. But I just decided not to worry about it. But those are the sorts of things that do occur, don't they? In this physical life, this material life we're living right here on planet Earth. But we do find a lot of tools, like Luke Skywalker. We choose our faith and we find a magic light that we can shine, and it can transform anything into peace and okayness. Maybe not what we wanted. Certainly this week wasn't what we wanted. But we can pray enough and know that we're putting God right on it. We're putting our resources, our love, and protection. And then we come away with the knowing. We don't want any of our military to be in harm's way. We don't want any of these people to be in harm's way. But we can say, God, if this is what's occurring right here, right now, in this moment, I suppose it's meant to occur, and we'll learn something from it. And what we'll learn is that we're going to pray peace wherever we are. We're going to be peace wherever we are. We're not going to exhibit hatred or unforgiveness. We're going to love all concerned and pray. And then ultimately, that we're all living the life that we should live. And is anyone in harm's way, actually? I mean, when you really bring it down to the bottom line, we are living a life of grace. And so someone can't pass before their time, can they? Really? So we just pray for all those that might be in harm's way, that the miracle of grace will lift them above their circumstances. And we'll pray for a higher way of seeing every single thing that's occurring. I remember, and this wasn't what I was going to talk about this morning, but I'm going to say it and then I'm going to move on with what I was going to say. Being in a congregation after the 9/11, and then a few months later, and I remember, I knew then, or I felt like an alien. Okay, I felt like an alien because I was the only person I knew after 9/11 that wasn't seeking retaliation. I had gone within and prayed, and all I wanted to know was what in the world makes people hate us this badly. And I guess I'm trusting you this morning with being able to tell you that, because I've got to tell you, when I confessed to a few people at that time that that's what I was thinking, and I was praying peace, and I wasn't praying hatred or retaliation or anything else. I was only praying to know why these people hate us so badly. And I had some really ugly things said to me. Are you really an American? Do you really care? Yeah. Supposedly peace-loving people said that to me. That's been, 21 years ago? Hard to believe, isn't it? But that's how I felt then. Why? Why do these people hate us that badly? There must have been something that's occurred at some point that's made people hate us. That's what I wanted to examine. That tells you where my heart was at that time. I wanted to know. And I want to know today what was in the heart of those that felt like they needed to go and invade this other country. And I want to pray for them. I want to pray that their minds will be changed, their hearts will be lightened. Whatever unforgiveness they had in their hearts, that would be changed. So this morning, I had come to talk about grace. And this woman that I was speaking of, Cheryl Richardson, she was talking about in her book, or the prelude to her book, that she had when she was talking about writing this book, about the unmistakable touch of grace, and you know it when you feel it. You know it. Sometimes you don't know how to explain it, but you know it. But she said she had a friend named Peter who was a recovering alcoholic. He said, before I got sober, I couldn't see a divine sign if it hit me in the face. There are a lot of people walking around the world like that, aren't there? They wouldn't know a divine sign if it hit them in the face. They'd want to go out and find who to blame. Find who to hate, have revenge upon. But some of the things that come with grace, you'll say, suddenly the perfect solution just popped into my mind. Have you ever had that happen? You're on the way to see a client, and the next thing you know exactly the house to show them. You know the property they'd be interested in. Let's say you're on your job and you're going to see a client about a difficult problem. And on the way, the solution just comes to mind. Sometimes you might say, I don't know where I found the courage, but I spoke up. You might say something like, I can't for the life of me figure out how it happened, but everything just fell into place. We might be right in the last semester of our getting a bachelor's degree and say, my goodness, every one of my professors just assigned so much work, I can't possibly get it done. But you will. You might even have a grandma that would help you out with it. You never know. And like Sherry this morning just went in with the children to teach them a little bit of music. And do you know that there was one of the children, unbeknownst to Sherry, one of the children that had said, I wish I could learn to play the violin. Isn't that the sweetest thing? Miss Nay told me that this week. Don't we just love that? But when you love, when you live in a sense of grace, you'll find that you know it. It may be on your way for chemotherapy, as my husband did for about 7 months a few years ago in Slidell. And on the way over there, every week, I would just pray for ease and grace. Ease and grace. And at the moment, it didn't seem like it was ease and grace. But looking back on it, it was. Perfect solution, perfect doctor, perfect everything. It was perfect. He went into the Lacombe Heart Hospital for a heart procedure, sent home, had a complication that led him right back over there where they found stage 3 colon cancer. And you look back on it and you think, wow, if he hadn't had that little heart event, they never would have found that. And so much so, with so many things in our lives, we know that. There, but by the grace of God, go I. How many times have we said that? But I do know, and I can tell you this beyond a shadow of a doubt this morning. Doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what circumstances you've come from. When you start affirming God's love in your life, when you start claiming it, when you start looking beyond the circumstances and see the wholeness and the peace that is the peace of God, it will be yours. Your life will become so much richer, fuller, in every sort of way when you look differently at everything. Someone brings up a conversation you don't want to have a part of, just with grace, ease and grace, you can say thank you, but no thanks. I'm headed right over there, I'm sorry. And let it go. You don't have to hold on to it. You don't have to be angry. Just let it go. So the reason for the sign on our slide this morning, grace freely given, inquire within. And that's because with God, it's as easy as pushing the door that says push here. And grace is freely given, but you must first align yourself with that higher power, that one we call God, and the Christ consciousness. And Jesus, who said, I have come to tell you that you have a light within you. And I hope this week that no matter what you're facing, that you will know that you can face it with grace and ease, and all sorts of miracles will come your way. Thank you for your time.